Recording in progress.
I do. What about frogs? Usual suspects.
No.
There we go.
Mr. Chair, just for the record, we are recording at this point and streaming, so.
Vice, while we wait for Mr. Jensen, would you be ready to go over some of the M1 sets of properties and then maybe give us a little bit of an update on the online map, versions of the map that are available online?
Okay, yes,
Okay.
We can talk about the M1, and also if Mr. Jensen's not here, we also prepared to talk about the green incentives also.
About the legacy rural properties.
We were unable to get those numbers that we discussed. Just, I guess, at the kind of the timing of when we discussed and trying to get those numbers.
Sure.
But that is something that we should be able to gather and send to the planning commission members.
Okay. All right, we'll go ahead and get started then and pick up with Vincent's portions. Drives. Okay, we're gonna call this meeting to order. This is a work session of the Richland County Planning Commission. Today is Monday, October 17th, 2022. And time is 12:13. Apologize for the delay, just getting everyone together. Starting a little late, but my name is Jason Branham. And staff, I just wanted to ask if you would confirm that the public notices of this meeting as required by law were distributed or published as necessary. Is that right?
That is correct.
Okay. So today being a work session, we will not have a portion of the meeting for public input. However, the public are invited to observe today our discussions, and the reasons for this work session were discussed some at our last regular meeting, and then of course they will bear out as we work through the agenda of topics that we wanted to discuss today. The next regular meeting of the Planning Commission is scheduled for November 7th at 3 p.m. And we do expect to provide for public input opportunities at that time. We do want to remind everyone that staff is efforting to keep an up-to-date ledger of the Planning Commission's proposed motions as to proposed text amendments, as well as the zoning map remapping process on the Planning Department's website, which that page can be accessed from the Richland County government's website. My understanding, just as of this morning, that a few of the items that were covered in the October, I believe it was October 3rd meeting, are not yet posted to the online version of the ledger, but staff indicates that they will get that updated shortly.
Excuse me, Mr. Chair.
Yes, Mr. Price.
As of the start of today's meeting, that ledger has been updated and is current with our last meeting.
Thank you very much. All right, so that covers items 1 and 2. And now we move into item 3. the sort of subsets I have written down for this item being the remapping include a review of the properties currently zoned for rural, and then also a review of select properties that staff has called to our attention that are currently zoned M1. That's right, isn't it, Mr. Price?
That's correct.
Okay. And then did just want to ask the staff if they could provide an update as to the status of the draft map and its availability online for public review. Can you just update us briefly on that as to the online map?
I don't believe that the most recent draft map is available online. I think we were just kind of waiting to finish with the M1. However, we can actually place that on the map, hopefully after today's meeting, going into the November Planning Commission meeting.
Yeah, again, just being today a work session, of course, you know this, Mr. Price, we won't be taking any binding votes today. Any motions that the commission might want to make, we'll probably just plan to add those to the agenda of the November meeting.
Correct.
So I would encourage you to post just the most accurate version of the map. I know some people, maybe we've heard from a couple of people that they don't love that as much just because it's something that's in flux. But, you know, again, I like to try to provide the most up-to-date information to the public so that they can be as much a part of the process and up to date in the process as they can. Let's see, Mr. Jensen, would you, I know you prepared a graphic for the properties that are currently zoned rural, and this is meant to be an effort to create a visual to help the public understand the differences between what would happen to the properties currently zoned rural under the version of the Land Development Code that was adopted by County Council in November 22 versus how they would be impacted according to the text amendment recommendations that are currently on the ledger with the Planning Commission. Would you like to go over that at this time?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Assistant County Administrator Eric Jensen for the record. Mr. DeLage, would you bring up the PDF file that discusses the rural lot size and densities? I mean, would zoom out, make that as large as possible, and whoa, not upside down. There we go. Thank you. So at the last Planning Commission meeting, we heard from several folks in the community who were concerned that the discussion on rural densities and lot sizes was complicated and that they did not understand what was being proposed. So I took my best shot to simplify the information. And so what we have before you here is a very simple chart that has three different scenarios. Scenario one is the 2021 LDC. That's the code that the council adopted in November. And there are, then across the headers, you'll see AG, the agricultural zone, HM, the homestead zone, and RT, the rural transition zone. And so in the 2021 code, it says 0.15 units per acre. So what that means is it's roughly 6.67, 6 2/3 acre per lot. So for people to understand from home who are watching, the way it's adopted right now in the AG zone, you have to have 6.67 acres per lot. So if you owned 13 and change, you could theoretically subdivide it into 2 lots. In the homestead zone, the current was basically 0.33. That means you have to have 3 acres per lot. And in the residential transition zone under the current code, under the adopted code, excuse me, it's 0.67, which means you have to have 1.5 acres per lot. Now, in the Planning Commission proposal, which is the second line, so in the proposed PC version, this is based on the motions that the Planning Commission made a couple months ago. In the AG, you would now have to have 3 acres per lot. In the HM, you'd have to have 1.5 acres per lot. And in the RT, you would have to have 1 acre per lot. Now, as I was putting this table together, I just thought to myself, if we want to make it really, really simple, we would say that in the AG zone, which is the commercial agriculture, so this is not a residential zone, this is a zone for commercial agricultural activities, we would just say 10 acres per lot. Because again, the goal of the AG zone is to discourage residential development and to preserve agricultural production. And then we would say in the HM zone, 2 acre minimum per lot. That's easy to understand. And then in the RT, it would be 1 acre. So 1, 2, and 10. So that's a very, so if the commission wants to go that direction, again, those are very easy numbers for people to understand and follow.
Thank you. And just a reminder that under our current recommendation, a property that is currently zoned RU but is 35 acres or larger would convert over to that AG zoning district. And then a property currently zoned RU that is less than 35 acres, and then I believe more than 3 acres or equal to, would be HM. And then as I recall, it was anything that's currently zoned RU that's 3 acres down to 1 acre would convert to the RT zoning district. And just a reminder as well that under the current RU, the minimum lot size per dwelling unit is 0.7 acres. Is that right, staff?
0.76.
0.76 acres per dwelling unit currently. So every version of these proposals would make the density less in those on those properties.
Mr. Chairman, may I add to that?
Yes, Mr. Jensen.
Thank you, sir. Again, ACA Jensen. So one of the things in my personal experience, doing this for almost 25 years now, is that 1 acre is a general threshold for quote unquote rural. In other words, once you get below 1 acre in size, it's really a suburban density. And we have zoning that allows roughly lot sizes of about 3/4 of an acre, the R1 zone. And so if somebody, had acreage and wanted to subdivide further, they could always apply for a different zone to get smaller. And as I looked at our matrix and the way our table flows, if we kept the 0.76 acreage density lot size in the RU, it would basically be a duplicate zone to the R1 because the R1 has a similar density. And so it doesn't make sense for us to have 2 of the same tool in our toolbox, which is one reason why, just purely as an outsider looking at this, it makes more sense for our true rural areas. If we want to keep them rural for real, then we need to have a slightly higher than 0.76 density, in my opinion.
Thank you. Just a good point to just ask the commission. Does anyone have questions or comments on what we've covered so far? Okay. Next up, if we could, again, at the last meeting, I believe it was, the staff called to our attention, select tracts of land currently zoned for M1 that they recommended we take a look at for possibly needing to be zoned something different due to the nature of current use or proximity to other properties around them, and being different and in their judgment, causing them to recommend something other than, what would otherwise be equivalent in the new land development code.
Mr. Chairman, quickly,
Mr. Johnson.
as we transition, the PDF slide that, do we have a copy of that in our package?
Staff speak to that. The
To the
PDF.
presentation that I just showed.
Yes.
No, I literally created it on Friday afternoon. So this is the first time it's been shared. So, but it will be circulated. All the materials that I'll present today will be circulated to the commission members
Okay.
and posted.
Thank you, Mr. Johnson. So I think, again, this, the purpose of asking staff to discuss these M1 properties is just to ask you to share a little bit of your thought process on this, and then we'll, just take that under advisement as we move forward.
Excuse me, Mr. Chair, can we maybe pause for a moment? We want to ensure that that the streaming is working.
Okay.
Here,
Dennis.
streaming's working. I got it on Facebook and YouTube.
Okay.
We can continue. All right. Yes, sir. All right. So, again, as stated, as we were looking to do more of an equivalency for most of the parcels in the county, I think the only one that really we couldn't do was the M1 zoning designation. And that was because that was a previous zoning designation that was intact prior to 2005, or the adoption of the 2005 Land Development Code. It carried over, and that actually is kind of like a hybrid of both commercial and residential uses. So as we looked at what those will convert to, that was the only one that we kept the proposed zoning as we presented for our maps from the 2021 Land Development Code. Those are the ones that actually went out back in, I guess you could say, were February. So we've kept most of those zoning designations because those were more in line with the character of the area and the uses that were in place under the M1. What we did see were there were 10 parcels, 8 parcels that would not fall under either commercial or industrial. And so we just wanted to kind of bring this to your attention because, there's just a difference between going from a industrial or commercial to go to maybe a potential open space or agricultural use. And we wanted to identify those to you.
So, Mr. Price, these are recommended exceptions to the general rule.
Yes, sir.
As to the translation table being what we're following.
That's correct.
Okay, literally for the remapping. All right, thank you.
And so, as I think looking at those, they all kind of made sense based on the character of the area and also the uses on the property. We just wanted just to bring those to your attention. More specifically, if you're looking at, y'all may have received these, but 4A and 4B, which would be 201 Powell Road and next to Technology Circle. Those are in the industrial parks off of Farrell Road. Those parcels are proposed to go to open space. Those consist of the golf courses. I believe that's the Spur at Northwoods Golf Course. That was one that really caught our attention because the surrounding properties are basically industrial. And then they are abutted by residential and institutional uses also. They're next to the Midlands Tech campus, but there's also some residential that's north of the parcels, but the remainder of the parcels are industrial. So we just kind of wanted you to take a look at those, maybe give an opinion on what may be the appropriate zoning designation for those.
Process wise, have these property owners, are they already aware of these proposals?
Well, they would have been sent out the notifications prior to, in February of this year when we sent it out to all of the other property owners in Richland County.
Okay.
And so this has not changed. I will tell you, especially the ones that I just identified, Powell Road and Technology Circle in the park. That was a big issue when we were implementing the TROS zoning designation. That's one of the reasons we didn't make those TROS, because the property owners were opposed to not keeping those parcels light industrial, even though they would be deemed, the golf courses would be deemed non-conforming.
Okay. But, I feel like it would be useful if you pulled up, there's an Excel spreadsheet with a list of these properties with some notes that staff has made.
For A and B.
This was shared with the commission as a whole, right? Before the meeting?
It is.
Haven't seen.
It was sent out, so I apologize if you haven't.
Yeah, and being that maybe not everyone's looked at it, if you could briefly go through those, you just reviewed 2 of them with us. That's lines, parcels 4A and 4B. I'm just.
All right. Tell me if you. Yes, and so I'll pretty much read from the notes that I have here. All right, so this parcel is currently zoned M1, but we're proposing that it go to R2. And the main reason is because it's adjacent to a residential development. This is next to the Misty Glen subdivision. And also for an M1 parcel, this does not offer any direct access to an interstate. So the most appropriate zoning seem to be R2 or residential as opposed to a light industrial. Questions? Or? So this parcel, of course, again, is also currently zoned M1 due to the constraints on the property by the flood zone. The most appropriate zoning would be OS, just because of the limited developability of the parcel itself. So due to constraints on the property, that the M1 wouldn't be the most appropriate zoning designation for it. This parcel is located off of Fairfield Road. And just as previously explained, same reasons, due to constraints on the property, that the most appropriate zoning would be open space as opposed to any type of industrial or commercial due to the limited ability to develop the site. You go, just go back, yeah. Back. And so we can kind of look at 4A and 4B, they're right next to each other. As you can see, those are currently developed as a golf course. Again, stated it's the Spur and Northwoods Golf Course. So the parcels north and I guess east of the properties are zoned light industrial, but you can see that there is a kind of a buffer between the residential, which is north of the site by, I believe there's Cumbus Creek. And Tom, if you zoom out a little bit, and you can also see that the Midlands Technical College is there. So that is one we really weren't quite sure of. Like I said, the most appropriate zoning for the golf course would be OS, which is open space, which would make that golf course conforming. However, any future developability of the golf course would require rezoning. So there's a potential of keeping it as a non-conforming use and making the zoning more in line with the surrounding properties.
For some reason, at some point in the past, the owners expressed resistance to rezoning to
Yes.
open space.
Yes, sir. During when we were looking to implement the TROS zoning designations, yes, sir, they did. So that would take care of 4A and 4B. This is an interesting one because you just had it for a rezoning request in which the applicants were requesting to rezone this property to RMMD. And it did receive first reading approval by council at their last zoning public hearing meeting. We originally designated this as AG. So I think that this may change based on the future actions of council. I believe second and third reading will be scheduled for this month. This parcel currently zoned M1, but there is a buffer, Mill Creek, that actually it buffers the industrial, the more established industrial uses, including the detention center. Tommy, can you zoom out a little bit? That are more west of the site, and the properties that are east of this site are more in line with what staff is recommending, which is AG. So we kind of use the flood zone as an identifier of what would be the most appropriate zoning designation for this parcel. It's stated on another parcel due to its proximity to residential, and also it looks like they're kind of like stub outs, I guess, for future access along Eclipse Lane and maybe even County Line Trail for future development of this site. So we felt the most appropriate zoning would be residential. And the same with this parcel, even though it's not adjacent to a subdivision or a highly dense residential development, it is abutted by residential development. And so for those reasons, it was recommended for residential also. This is another parcel that is actually currently before County Council for a map amendment. This is scheduled to go for the zoning public hearing on the 25th of October, in which the applicant is requesting to rezone from M1 to RSLD. I believe at the October Planning Commission meeting, that Planning Commission recommended against the request to rezone to RSLD. And I guess the actions of the County Council will kind of determine which recommendation we may make in the future.
Okay. Any questions for staff on these parcels? Again, just process-wise, this would be different from what we're used to with applicants approaching, submitting an application for rezoning. This would be, I guess this would fall under the category of like a planning commission or a staff initiated rezoning.
Yes, sir. You're talking about the 8 parcels that we identified?
Yes.
Yes, sir. That's probably as close to it as what we've done.
So how, is there a posting requirement under the county ordinances? A posting requirement?
No, sir. All of this will take place along with the map that will be eventually adopted by county council, because technically we are rezoning all parcels of the county to a
Right.
new zoning designation. So there wouldn't need to be any little posting of these properties,
Okay.
except for the 2 that came before the planning commission and subsequently county council for the zoning public hearing.
Okay. You'd be able to, I mean, as far as you're concerned, any reason why we couldn't direct staff to post these specific properties just because of the different nature of the impacts to these property? And then being kind of exceptions to the translation table?
No, sir. Good question. I don't know if we need to do this. Again, this is in line with the other map amendments, essentially the rezoning that we're doing throughout the county. And I think you could make the argument that this could be viewed for many of the parcels in the county. Even though we just pointed these out, we just really wanted you to see that there was a big change for these. But again, the property owners have been notified of these changes. And if they have any objections, they can come and speak to us. Also, this has also been part of our map that's been on the website for people to also look at.
Okay. Anything else on this item 3, the remapping, before we move to item 4 to discuss the green development incentives? All right. Further, we'll just go ahead and move to that. Staff, you maybe want to pull up the text or something like that of those provisions.
So, Mr. Chair, while
Yes, Mr. Price.
this is being pulled up, I'll tell you, so based on the last meeting that the Planning Commission held, and this was discussed, staff has done a little more research on this. And one of the things that we looked at, well, actually a couple of things we looked at, but mainly we wanted to look at the achievability of these incentives in order for them, at least in order for them to get the bonuses that will come along with it. I'll turn this over to Mr. Smith shortly so he can discuss it. He's done a little bit of research on this. Also, we would also point out that one of the things that could be looked at if it was determined to keep the green code, the green development incentives, is potentially look at what those incentives will be. Maybe potential reduction in density bonuses might be something to look at as opposed to doing away with the entire incentive.
Okay, Mr. Smith.
Good morning. So after further examination on the energy conservation, alternative energy, and various other green building incentives or features, I investigated several of them, one of which I know that was particularly pointed out was the central AC Energy Star. And I guess the concern was that this was very achievable by the majority of the industry. While this might be the way of thinking, from my research, most Seer ratings that are qualified for Energy Star have to be 15 or higher. In the state of South Carolina right now, they have to be 13.5 minimum. So starting 2023, that SEER rating for South Carolina will go up to 14. The Energy Star rating for 15 presumably will have to go up as well. So with that said, that piece of that information led me to the next one, which was the tankless water heating systems. Talking to various people in the industry, when you're building 100 homes, try to find your cheapest alternative. So looking at hot water heating or tankless water heating systems is probably not the most economical. Also researched amongst Mungo, Southern Homes, and various other sites to see if I could price select these various elements, and I wasn't able to. Skylights, wasn't able to find any industry that provides that, at least not for 20% of a habitable area. Green roofs, or even cool roofs for that matter, are very rare. I don't know when's the last time any of us have ever seen a green roof on someone's house, or a metal roof that isn't a barn, or a house that just kind of sticks out because it's a metal roof that is a particular color. And what a cool roof is a kind of a metal roof that has a different coat of paint on it that refracts the lighting, that cools the house better. So some of these provisions in themselves are not as common as we were led to believe, or we think we believe. And amongst the other ones that I was looking at, those were the three of them that really pointed out to me the most. But the vegetation, this conservation set-asides, all of these have to be met. Now, the one thing that I did notice is just by having one of these does not mean you get the incentive. You have to have 5 incentives or 5 features to achieve one incentive. Now, once you've reached that incentive, you cannot reuse these features for another incentive. So once you achieve that increasable allowable height beyond the maximum allowed, that incentive has been used, and those features that you use to achieve that have been used. So you have to move on to others to achieve other incentives. And so that's kind of my gist about the whole situation. Is a lot of these, while on the surface seem like they are achievable, some of them are, but the multitude of them that you have to achieve becomes more difficult as you move through it.
Okay, thank you, Mr.
Mr. Chairman, question.
Yes, Mr. Johnson.
In your summary, once you achieve those, say, 5 items, is it prescriptive, or do you have to still make an application?
As prescription, you're referring to?
As of right, once you achieve those 5, or do you still have to, I just don't remember, do you still then have to submit the formal application for it to be reviewed to achieve those bonuses?
Yes, so you would have to ultimately still apply for everything, but with those being in your plan, and the only way you can achieve those is having those kind of approved, from my understanding. So once, I guess I'm not really understanding your question, is once they're achieved, then you can't use them again.
It's automatic. Well, is it, once you achieve those 5, it's automatic? Once you demonstrate you've met those hurdles? Once I've cleared those hurdles, I get it. I don't have to, it's still not a discretionary decision that if I do it, then I can apply for it.
Sorry, excuse me. During your submittal process, I guess, for your development, it seems like the assumption is that this will be part of a residential subdivision development. So all of these will have to be shown to have been met. And once that review is done, then you will be allowed to go ahead and build. Of course, we would have to do, also work with our building department to look at, make sure some of these incentives are also being met, and also potentially do some inspections in the field. But yeah, once you submit those plans to us and those are reviewed, you would then be able to go ahead and construct.
Mr. Smith, could you go ahead and just describe a little bit more about the Seer rating that you referenced earlier? What is that?
Sure. So the Seer rating is something the HVAC industry uses to rate their energy efficiency. These elements are used or are conditioned by, how many BTUs are used, how big of a tonnage is used. Also, the Seer rating changes based on what kind of unit you use, whether it's a split unit, whether it's a window unit or central AC unit. That Seer rating varies between those. Just by going on to Lowe's.com or Home Depot or various other big box stores, you can find these Seer ratings of, lower all the way down to 13, but all the way up to 22. Now, South Carolina, we are in a region where you have to have at least a 13.5 right now, but that's being raised to 14 being raised to 15 this year. And that presumably will be raised, but the conditions that those Seer ratings are based out of are based on pretty much of their energy efficiency.
The Energy Star designation, that's different from the Seer rating, right?
No, sir. So the Seer rating is in concert with the Energy Star. To be Energy Star qualified or certified, it has to meet a minimum of 15 Seer.
Yeah, they're not the same thing, but to get that Energy Star status, you have to have a certain number on your Seer rating.
Right, and to achieve that certain Seer rating, you have to achieve other measurables, which are, your BT usage, your watts per hour, and other various elements.
Okay. You indicated earlier that to achieve that Energy Star rating, which is one of the incentives that you can, one of the things that you can have to obtain an incentive, you say you have to have a 15 Seer rating. Is that right?
Correct. Currently, you have to have at least a 15 Seer rating. But come next year, the minimum you'll have to have is a 15 in the state of South Carolina. Now, presumably, that Energy Star rating would have to go up in order to achieve that. Now, talking to people in the industry of HVAC, I've asked them about the Power Star, or the energy rating.
You said who sets the Energy Star rating?
Energy Star is actually an entity of their own. It's EnergyStar.gov.
Okay.
They are a government agency that sets the ratings on various appliances. And so with that, I haven't been able to find any information about whether that star rating will change in concert with the regulation. So that's something to be seen.
Able to see how the other states compare. I guess we're talking state building codes versus Energy Star.
Yes, sir. So in depending on where you live, the SEER rating is going to be higher in hotter locations because in California, the energy usage is much higher. The amount of people using that energy is much higher. So the SEER rating has to be higher. In the north, not so much. You don't have to have a SEER rating as high. So the SEER rating is actually broken up into, I believe, 3 general areas, which is the north, the south, and then the southwest. And those ratings vary between those states and those regions.
You mentioned earlier trying to use different neighborhood websites to price select a tankless water heater. You were just trying to figure out based on the options available for the home construction, or what was that?
So various forms of research, whether it was me contacting them through phone or going through their website, looking at their pictures that they have of their model homes, or just trying to construct a home, just like you try to construct a car online. You can do it online on the various websites. Now, you can go in there and select central AC, but it doesn't let you select what kind of AC unit that is. So for all you know, you could be buying a Seer 13 or a Seer 22. There's no specification on that.
What about the tankless water heater? You were saying you were trying to buy one, like propose that you would buy a house with a tankless water heater, and then what happened?
So what I was saying about the tankless water heater, and this kind of goes with the HVAC units as well, is when you're building, instead of these, let me just start over. These incentives are primarily going to be used for larger developments. They're not going to be used for the one-time home buyer that's building their dream home, or, 2 houses here, 2 houses there. This is primarily used for their major subdivisions. That's what the majority of these features and incentives are meant to be used for. So when you're building 100 homes, 200 homes, whatever you have may you, price for goods and services and products becomes a thing for your budget. And if everybody knows, a tankless water heater versus a conventional water heater, there's a substantial money difference there. And when you're building 100 homes, that makes a big difference.
Yes, Mr. Dennis.
Yeah, so when we're talking about tankless water heaters, when you go onto the websites of any of these builders and they're natural gas communities, they all boast this: tankless water heater. No holding tank, so energy isn't wasted for storing or heating water when it's not in use. Every one of them. So they're boasting the energy savings that you get with the tankless water heater. These builders, they're using, in the state of South Carolina, R38 is the code standard for installation. Most of the builders here are using up to R50 for attic installation, along with spray foam in the walls instead of insulation fiberglass. Insulation fiberglass about every 25 years needs to be redone. The spray foam lasts up to 80 years. It's also a more effective option. And, that's not even listed in the green initiative over here, but it's something they're doing. They're also using radiant barrier sheaths on the roofs that, up to 97% of the sun's radiant heat from the home's attic, and that helps lower temperatures in the attic by 30 degrees, thus helping lower the temperature inside the house also, along with improving the heating and cooling ability inside the house. It improves energy efficiency, thermo radiant barrier. It's almost, not every builder uses it, but it is almost industry standard across when you're looking at them. We talked about the tankless water heater. I can move on to the HVAC systems. HVAC systems are based on size of the houses. So the HVAC systems, they're using, it's not just the way we used to do it, where it just blasts AC through the whole house. They're using control zones in it now. So those control zones also help with the efficiency of that HVAC system, along with using programmable and smart thermostats. These builders are also using low E windows. So in the summer, it's also helping reduce your power bills, and in the winter, it's helping reduce your power bills as well. One of the cool things is the coating that they're putting on those windows. When I was doing some research, is it's very cost efficient for the builders to use those type of windows, because a lot of these companies are moving towards it, because the companies that are providing this stuff, they're getting tax breaks on selling it. So those tax breaks are passed on to the consumer in other ways. Builders also using water conservation shower heads, faucets, toilets. Also, any of the appliances you buy from the builders to put in there are Energy Stars appliances. Some builders are even going as far as putting electric car charging ports in garages. They're using LED flush mount Energy Star lights. These lights use 90% less energy than traditional incandescent bulbs. They're boasting that too. And some last over 10 years. So, I mean, it's that. And one of the biggest things was the HERS rating. So when we look at Energy Star is, okay, it's a cool thing, but the HERS rating is actually better than an Energy Star. Energy Stars are yes or no. Does it meet this criteria? A HERS rating actually is a home energy rating system. So you actually have to write down numbers that's figured up in the thing in order to say you are a HERS index, which is actually better than Energy Star. So Energy Star, like I said, is a yes or no certification rather than the actual score of a new home's energy efficiency. The HERS index rates actual energy efficiency and estimates annual savings cost. When I look over the green stuff, I'm not trying to get rid of the green stuff. I think the green stuff's good, but I think we have an opportunity to do something that government doesn't actually do most of the time. We look at things from the past. However, a lot of this stuff is caught up with where we're at right now. So why not take this time and look into the future and find something better than what we got in here that was pretty much done between 2012 and 2015. These standards is where I found them from. And now this is all these standards that's coming in now with these builders, because, I mean, people want to buy energy efficient houses. So all this other stuff they're doing, which is actually way better than the Energy Star. So to me, going Energy Star is going backwards. So I would like to look at something like if these houses can get a HERS rating of above something, then go in that route. The government, we do a lot of things backwards. I think we actually have a chance for us as a whole to actually move forward for a better green objective for the county. When we look at the density, I was looking at the density, how the density affects, like if they meet this stuff, they get a density bonus. But one of the things I haven't found is, does density help housing values or lower cost of housing? Well, the craziest thing is I haven't found anything, but I did find in the academic paper published by the Lincoln Institute of Land Policy, Housing Affordability in Global Perspective working paper, published, like I said, by the Lincoln Institute of Land Policy. Their findings confirm earlier studies that show that housing affordability deteriorates as cities face increase in population and density of their urban extent. I want to find a better way to save more. If we're going to do it, let's do it. Let's not dilly-dally around and just give some things. Now, the other side of this, when I go to look at the commercial side, it's easier for them to actually hit a lot of this stuff. Energy Star. It is very easy for commercial to hit it. Because those units that they're dealing with are not 15 SEER. They're way bigger. They can get that sort of stuff. And there's no HERS index for commercial. Commercial is pretty much yes or no. Does it meet? Does it not? So, I was looking in through the commercial stuff, and I couldn't find much to go back on the commercial stuff, but I think there are some areas that we go forward on it. But I think the residential, we really need to take a harder look and get more of a leaning forward way. I mean, I tried to do some research on on geothermal in this area. It ain't going to happen in Richland County. I mean, I just, what I found with geothermal was not promising here. You got to get up towards Greenville to really make that work. Our water table's too high up here, so we can't utilize the geothermal. However, we could utilize solar, but the state of South Carolina's solar initiative is not in line with homeowners. Because if a homeowner puts solar on their house and they go to sell it, they either pretty much have to pay off the loan if they get a loan on it, or if the buyer takes that over, they have to be able to assume that loan. And if they assume it, their DTI could go above and the lender not let them buy a house. So that hurts people selling and buying houses too. South Carolina's got a long way to go with the green initiative. It does. That's why I think we could be one of the leading counties to figure this out. I don't want to go with the as we say, the land development standard over here that a lot of other people are going with. I want to find something better to better our community. That's kind of how I seen it. And that's kind of why I had those talking points done up, because I've done a lot of research on this. And, you know, you hit some of the things I was going to talk about, the Seer Rating and stuff. The one thing I did talk to somebody about the Seer Rating with the federal government, we're just catching up to the federal government. We're not surpassing the federal government. So that's one of the things that South Carolina, we're getting there, but we're not there. So instead of coming from behind, let's just take the torch and lead it in the future. That's kind of where I'm at with it.
So, Mr. Dissy clearly made a bunch of notes in preparation for today's meeting. One of the studies by name, but
so pretty much all this information that I got is actually from every builder from Mungo, Eastwood Homes, Great Southern. All this is off their website and what they include in their houses.
So I think maybe you were articulating, the purpose for bringing all that up, but do you want to like summarize, or do you have like a proposal, like specific proposals based on your comments?
So one of the proposals that I was thinking about was really sitting down and kind of not taking the green initiative away, but taking it out for residential and looking at it a little bit more, seeing what we could do with the HERS rate and see how we could incorporate that into the county, boost those HERS ratings up so that the county and people could utilize stuff. But we also got to be careful along with density. If we overpack some of these areas, it might be one of the things about density that went with all this is density is a double-edged sword. The more dense some areas are, it helps with, infrastructure, but half your infrastructure, and then it overwhelms the other half. So there's a lot. I mean, we talked about this last meeting, and I've had some thoughts, and then I didn't like some of the ideas I had, and then I kind of went back and forth. But I really think it would be beneficial if we really looked at it in depth. I don't think this is something we can come up with in a month or two. I think this is going to take a lot of work. I really do. If we go forward with just leaving it like it is, I think we're doing it injustice to our citizens in the county and the environment.
Okay, thank you. Anything else from other commissioners at this point? Anything else from staff on the topic?
Yes, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Smith.
Yes, I just wanted to point out that when these denser areas are permitted, the allowable density, just because these open space set-asides occur and these allowable density increases, the amount of units does not. So while you can have 10 homes on a specific kind of zoning designation, and you get these incentives, doesn't mean you get more homes because of those incentives. It just means you get to pack them in tighter. That's all that means. Just wanted to point that out.
Mr. Dennis.
One of my things about density wasn't just about single family, it's about multifamily too. So, I mean, across the board, that's kind of what I was getting at. It's not just about the single family, it's about multifamily. It's about how we can make affordable housing. But, the big thing about affordable housing is out there, oh, if we can get these bonuses, we can make more affordable housing. I have yet to see affordable housing in this county being built. It's far from none in this county. We talk about it all the time, but I don't see it. Every time I look out there, a house 300,000, like even the smaller units that were $100,000 units, no, they're selling for 300 now. Sorry, that's not affordable housing. I know that's a total separate thing, but in government, we start linking green initiatives and affordable housing together, and that's just not where we should be going with it. We should really, if we're going to do it, let's do it. Let's find a way to incentivize some affordable housing areas. Let's find a way to incentivize better green initiatives. Like one of the things that I liked about the green initiative was electric car charging ports. That's something I haven't seen in many parts across the nation. South Carolina is actually doing it. Kind of threw me for a loop when I seen it, and I started researching into it a little bit more. And housing prices are going up, car prices are going up, and gas prices are still going up right now. But there's got to be a way to do it. I keep talking around it. I just don't know the way to do it yet. That's why I'm hopefully all the commissioners, we all can come together and figure out a way to go forward with it instead of just sitting back and doing something that was prepared a few years ago. I would like to, no matter how we do it, we're always going to be behind, but I mean, we're almost behind. If I did my math right, by 5 years behind from when this whole thing started working and when I was looking at how these tables and all this stuff goes along with Clarion. Kind of some of this stuff was back from 2012 and 2015. There was one or two things from 2018, but that's the closest that I found throughout my research on the world.
Your sense was just that some of these green building features are pretty status quo at this point. They're not innovative as they might have been 10 years ago, I guess.
Yeah, they're not as innovative, but there are a lot of good innovations. And I hate to say it, there are good innovations. When we talked about the cool roof, that's great for commercial buildings. There's a lot of stuff. Charlotte, North Carolina, they started adding some cool roof initiatives in some of their taller buildings. The central area, that's going to be commercial. The use of solar and tankless water heating systems through structure. That's one thing we haven't seen is a solar water heater. I have seen them in the past in other areas. I've seen them in Florida. I've seen them in North Carolina, but I have not seen any in Richland County. That's one of the things that I think could go, a solar water heater. But it's just too bland for me. It's not enough. We always talk about green and helping save the earth and energy conservation, but why go with the status quo of land development codes when we can really eat it up and go further into the future with it?
And some of my sense, obviously, is that, we certainly have a public policy that's in favor of things that are environmentally friendly. And obviously, this draft code tries to incentivize those kinds of things. Just in reviewing at high level, some of my thoughts, again, were just, if we're going to give something, then we should get something meaningful in return. And so I don't want to give out any freebies, and a freebie kind of feels like whatever the status quo is already. I mean, if I'm a person who wakes up every day and breathes, it would be weird for somebody to come up to me and say, hey, I'm going to give you $1 for every day you wake up and then $1 for every breath you take. I'm doing it already. So I think that there are meaningful green initiatives that maybe we should incentivize. But the other thing that I feel like I'm looking at is, again, just wanting to have simple and transparent zoning districts. And this kind of mechanism is similar to the cluster development mechanism in that, you know, it's modifying what the underlying zoning district is, to the point with the density credits that, you know, I think it really does start to change the meaning of what the zoning district is when you're talking about potentially a density credit of 25% all the way up to 30%. You're jumping in entire zoning districts at that point. And so the nature and the character that was originally intended by that original zoning district gets modified through the utilization of these incentives and of these credits. And as was called attention to earlier by staff and by others, the benefits are not typically to the individual home builder, the owner builder. It's usually a developer type situation, and development is how most of our residential homes get built now. But the scale of the impact is something that, weighs heavily on me, that knowing that we're not talking typically about one piece of property on 1 acre. We're, potentially talking about 400 homes on 100 acres or something like that. So, whatever incentives we provide, I do think that they should be moderate and reasonable, and maybe less extreme and less impactful when it comes to things like density. This is just some of my thoughts.
Mr. Chairman.
Yes, Mr. Johnson.
I hear you and the Vice Chair. I would reemphasize a few things that staff said, that these aren't just layups. There are multiple elements that have to be incorporated. I think there are 5, am I correct, that have to be met to obtain it. I'd also emphasize staff's comments as it relates to how we're using the term density. And so when you start to jump through from one zoning district to the next, we're really talking about how those units are being placed and laid out from a development standpoint, not purely or solely a math number of going from 20 units an acre to 50 units an acre in terms of increased household. So I would say that. I think as well, my colleague raised a couple of points earlier that I think that for those that don't live in the real estate industry, that I'd like to point out. Part of the argument for why we need to look at making these revisions is the lack of affordable housing and how some of those entry-level homes, at the example, 1,000 are now 300 some thousand. That's a separate policy issue in terms of giving the teeth to maintain long-term affordability. When we look at the success that Charleston has had, we look at the success that Greenville has had as it relates to affordability. It's not the zoning issue at play. It's the restrictive covenants to make sure that those units stay affordable for a long period of time. So that's a separate policy issue. And when the issue was first raised in our last meeting, there were 2 divergent issues. One was density and the other was whether or not we're going to be effective in terms of our green. So I would like for us to, bifurcate these issues and focus on one and the other. If we are focusing on the green incentives, then I would like to focus on those green incentives, not necessarily effective about the issue of density and density bonuses, because you have to have incentives at different thresholds in order to carry out the whole point of having some incentives.
Yeah, I think we would just sense that the main incentive is the density bonus. So,
I'm saying, but what it takes to get there, do we need to revisit the level of what those goals are?
Right. Yeah. Yeah, they are kind of 2 separate areas of the same conversation. I agree with that. Very good. Thank you, Mr. Johnson. Anyone else? All right, good. Well, obviously we're not going to be voting on any motions or anything like that today. So good food for thought and good conversation. If there are any proposed motions by members of the commission, we just ask you to get those several days in advance of our November 7th meeting, if that's when you would like to have it heard.
Mr. Chairman, may I be recognized?
Mr. Jensen, yes.
Thank you. I would like to just very quickly, if I may, go over the log from the last time, just to make sure that the commission, before they move on from this point, have discussed and addressed everything that was brought up at the last meeting, just to make sure.
Okay. Yeah. Thank you.
That is okay. Mr. DeLage, if you would bring up the log there. And if you would, I cannot read it at that scale. If you can zoom that, make it very nice and large for me. If you use the PDF format, it's actually easier to read, because it breaks it up into, there we go. Just enlarge that. There we go. Thank you. I can almost read that from here. So, in fact, if you would, Mr. DeLage, will you actually read those, since it's a little bit difficult for me to read from this distance? Just go through each one of them. Again, I think I captured what the commission members said, but I want to make sure that was accurate.
All right, so the first comment is, as to animal shelter, I move to recommend the addition of animal shelters permitted by right, subject to special requirements in the AG, HM, and RT zoning districts.
And then what was the action that the commission took? It's just over on the third column.
Okay, so the motion passed to add the animal shelter use as a special requirement in the AG and HM zoning districts.
I remember. Okay, next one, please.
So as to animal services, veterinary hospital or clinic, I move to recommend the addition of veterinary hospital or clinic permitted by right, subject to special requirements in the AG, HM, and RT zoning districts. And then that action was motions passed to add the veterinary hospital or clinic use as special requirement in the AG and HM zoning. Next motion is I move to delete subsection 26 3.1 F4, which provides for zero lot line development and any other provisions for zero lot line development of single family dwellings. Motion passed to delete subsection 26 3.1 F4 without a replacement or substitution. Next motion was I move to delete subsection 26 3.1 F5, which provides for the complete elimination or massive reductions on minimum lot width requirements in instances involving cluster development and any other provision for cluster development of single family dwellings. Motion passed to delete the subsection 26 3.1 F4 and to direct staff to draft a substitute standard. As to green incentive bonuses, staff was directed to research and provide additional information to the commission.
Thank you.
And last was zoning map revisions. Staff was directed to provide an electronic copy of the M1 map to the commission for the further analysis and to consolidate the information from all previous maps into one map for the final commission decision or discussion, excuse me.
So thank you, Mr. DeLage. So that was the information that I gathered from the last meeting. And so I just wanted to comment really briefly on 2 points there. The first, the cluster development. It will take time. That is not something that can be done in a matter of weeks. For me to research that and to look at the applicability here to the county. So that's something that I hope to be working on in November, December, January timeframe, when the council is less active and I have more time to devote to this. The last one on the mapping, again, we will get that map together. So I want to make sure that everyone who's at home listening in understands that regarding the map, what we will do now is we will take all of the information that we have accumulated over the last 5-6 months that we've been working since the restart began. And we will put that on one map that will then get posted so that everybody can go see cumulatively what the impact is of what has been recommended and discussed. That is something that will occur. And then at that point, once all of the text and all of the mapping comes together, that is when we would bring it back to the commission for a vote on everything. And some items may get pulled. Some items the commission may say, you know what, we're just not ready to move that forward. And when that vote occurs, that will occur. But up until this date, these have all been informal directions to staff to compile and prepare information. So I want to make sure everybody understands that's what the motions have been so far. They have just been direction to staff to prepare this information, to bring it back for a final consideration in front of the commission.
Yeah, just to affirm again that, you know, I would expect, just based on the development of our conversations, that, you know, we would look to have a vote on the full slate of recommended text amendments and a zoning map at the November 7th meeting. Obviously, that's, you know, there's potential for change there, but that's what we've been working towards as a commission, and kind of duly noted by what Assistant Administrator Jensen indicated earlier. We may very well, you know, take a vote, and then, you know, that may still leave some execution work that the staff might need to carry out as they prepare to hand it over to County Council for review and a vote. Let me just ask if we can have, off the top of my head, the two sets of information that were shared today so far that I don't think had been made available to the public yet. One was the M1 list of eight properties, as it were, and then the other was, what was the other? Lost my train of thought.
The rural density equivalency table.
The rural
Yes.
density table. If we could have both of those things, Mr. Price, you got a master list, right, of people that have requested information, agenda, things like that. Could we get those two items circulated to that email list?
Yes, sir.
Okay. All right.
Mr. Chair, if I may be recognized.
Mr. Jensen.
Thank you. If you would like, I can also, I'm prepared today to go over the table of uses for the residential zones. I cleaned it up a little bit from the last meeting. If you would like for the commission to review it while we're here, I can present that. If not, we can just put it online, and that's fine also.
I'd be happy to have you put it online, but I don't know if the commission wants to hear or have that presented today. Maybe just put it online.
Okay. Yes,
okay.
Sir.
Okay. If there's nothing else on item 4, I'd like to move on to item 5, which was a requested discussion on. Yes, Mr. Dennis.
I got one question for Mr. Smith.
Okay.
It seems like you were doing a lot of digging like me. Did you find anything groundbreaking in your digging that we could go forward that you and I could talk about?
I believe it's funny you said that. Not last weekend, but the weekend before, I did a presentation out at Riverbank Zoo about sustainability and conservation, and how the county can do better and what the different elements should be implemented and various things. So I do have that information. So I'd love to share that with you.
Thank you.
Yep.
Good. Right. Nothing else. We'll move on to item 5, discussion on the future public participation process. And I thank Mr. Johnson for raising the topic, because if nothing else, I think it gives us a good opportunity to take a real quick high-level review of the prior types of community involvement that have taken place over these years. Just a real high level, I probably would ask staff to speak to that. And then I'd like to, maybe after that, make a few comments as far as recommendations for future timetables or thoughts on communicating once we've completed this phase of our involvement in this process.
Mr. Chairman.
Yes, Mr. Johnson.
If I could, just moment of privilege, please. I raised and asked the question to have it put on the agenda. If I could just have a couple minutes, please, sir.
Yes.
And I'll try and be extremely brief.
Okay.
And I do walk to have the comments from staff as well. First, I raised the question about public participation, not as a criticism of the work that this body has done before the three new members joined. We recognize and applaud the dedication it takes to sit here and work through the process and listening to the folks who've not been pleased at different points and those who want different changes. And Mr. Benson, I also want to make sure that staff understands we're very much supportive and appreciate the work done in terms of public engagement. But having said that, in the time between being asked and appointed to serve and actually taking the seat, that was a time frame that there was a lot of media attention, a lot of public attention to the rewrite, and not all of those meetings were without energy and enthusiasm from the public. Because I happen to have made my living mostly doing community development and public participation, I have a real acute appreciation for the distinction between the media campaign that Mr. Jensen referenced in terms of once we get to that plan, we get this approval and reaching out versus what I call a participation process where the public is engaged actively in the process of forming it so that people don't feel like a decision was made and then it's being announced, as opposed to having meaningful engagement so far. And all of the topics and conversations that we've had so far when we've had people come, it's a lot of it is surrounded, I have assembled this amount of acreage, hey, I want to pass this around to my children, but if we subdivide it among my 3 to 5 kids, do they still have the ability? I mean, we've heard that story just in the last 3 months. How many times? Several. And I think that that chart that Mr. Jensen showed earlier today shows the progress in hearing and reacting to that. And so I think that there's both good news even in the process of doing this, but my encouragement and my suggestion, and I'll try and get something written to you and Mr. Price, is that we ask a specific request of staff to do something that's more engaged in terms of participation of what we're doing now and looking at these proposed amendments that we're working on before it's passed and approved, not afterwards. So I just want to give that as context. I think that that's extremely important. And if I'm the only one, I'm the only one. Then, but I think I'm duty bound to say we need to expand that process. And quite honestly, I think it'll save us some hours after the fact down the road.
Mr. Jensen, you wanted to speak?
Yes, thank you, sir. Thank you, Commissioner Johnson. Much appreciated. And yes, I understand exactly what you're saying. So thank you. We will have a period of time from once the Planning Commission makes a recommendation to the point where before council will start their consideration of this. And that period of months is the time that I am proposing to engage the public and to talk about these issues. Because if the number that the Planning Commission as a quote unquote professional technical group is not the right number, that is the time for us to engage the public and say, this is what the Planning Commission is suggesting. Is it the right thing? Before we get to council and we actually make a recommendation. So I've heard And I understand the difference. I understand what you're saying between announcing something and actually entering into discussions. And so we will do that. That's my commitment.
Mr. Price, or I don't know, Mr. DeLay, somebody can kind of just give a sense of some of the types of activities that have occurred beyond just the regular planning commission meetings and the public input there that engaged the public process.
One of the main avenues that we've used to try to communicate the land development code, or the 2021 land development code, was to have public meetings in various areas of the county and invite citizens to come to those. I guess just kind of thinking along with Mr. Johnson, there's always that question of just providing adequate notice, or how do people receive the information of the meetings? We can post it on a website, we can put it in the newspaper, but that doesn't always necessarily guarantee that everyone will get that. So the main ones that we've used to personally engage with people is to go to the communities. Again, in addition to also putting it on our website. I think the biggest, I guess you could say, return that we've received from citizens was when we sent out the notifications about the remapping. I think that was probably the most personal way we could actually reach people and also field their questions. And then once that was done and staff members were able to receive phone calls, we established an email address where people could email in their questions also, to help address any concerns they may have or questions they have with the new land development code.
A question,
Right.
Mr. Price. Some time ago, months and months ago, we had a discussion about whether or not the signs that we use when we're posting information about a proposed remap or zoning change, we talked about whether those signs were adequate and whether or not we wanted to include a QR code. And I bring this to your attention and to the members of the commission, because just yesterday, I received a call from two citizens concerned about proposed change in their neighborhood, and they're here today. And we want to, of course, do our very best to make sure that the citizens are aware. But when we as commissioners talked about it, I don't think we ever came to a final decision about how we can make sure that we do a more adequate job of making sure that the signs can be seen and read, and what should we put on that. Do any of you who were commissioners, not recently, but prior to our 3 new people coming on, remember that conversation? And we didn't finish it, did we? We talked about it, but we didn't take
Yes, we
definitive
definitely
action,
talked
did
about
we?
it. And I think we were kind of moving in that same direction of
Right.
wanting to promote visibility, greater visibility. So sounds like a good candidate for a motion to be added to the agenda for the next meeting.
Sure.
Mr. Dennis.
I think we came up with the 90% conclusion. I'm pretty sure, because I thought we was talking about placing signs, but I don't think we finished with the
Right, we
QR
didn't
code.
finish it. We didn't finish it.
I think we got almost all the way there, and then
Yeah,
we started working on the LDC pretty heavy.
Right. I will say as I
Mr.
remember,
Price.
and I do invite both Mr. DeLage and Mr. Smith to chime in on this one. I do remember there were 2 parts to that. One had to do mostly with the posting, as far as how frequent we place the signage for a parcel.
Distance between signs.
Yes,
Yeah.
that was probably what we discussed more of. I think, as Ms. Frierson was just stating, looking at the sign itself, something that we've been looking at. I will tell you, this question has come up probably since I've been here. The ability to be able to read a sign from the right of way, which is, it's not easy. And I think if, during, my travels around, whenever you see signs, various methods have been used. With us, we actually, we put the date on the sign, and we also will include what the request is going from and to. I know the city of Columbia kind of does some of the same things, but I've also seen other places where they would just put a sign up and have maybe just a letter on there, or just something that just says rezoning and a phone number so people can call in there. But ultimately, it's really difficult to fully outline what the request is for people as they're just riding by to see what the rezoning request is.
Didn't we, not change the draft before it went to county council in November, at least as to the distance between signs?
I believe we did.
Yeah.
And we can
Guys find that in
find that.
the code.
Thing that we might
Ms.
consider.
Frierson.
You know how when candidates run for office, they sometimes pay to have a digital sign, and they are very eye-catching. I really have no idea how much they cost, but there are certain locations in our county wherein the visibility is great. Can we look in terms of how much it would cost to do, not to replace the signs within a neighborhood, but also to include some digital signs that pertain to zoning?
Right. Yeah. All things that are worth a discussion for sure. I'm thinking about like 3-sided signs too, again, just trying to help increase visibility. Because I know a lot of times the signs they're facing the roadway. If you're driving past 45 miles an hour, really hard to notice.
Yeah, I think looking at that, that's something that we can look at as a staff. I think there are ways to post the property. Again, I don't know if you're driving 45 miles an hour, you're going to be able to actually read what the sign is.
Right.
But there are ways to actually orient the sign so that it's a lot easier for people to at least see what the request is.
Yeah, they'll at least be able to see that there is
Yeah.
a request.
Yeah, parallel to the road is probably not always the best. Usually what we find is, if you post a property, maybe on the ends of the property, that you can do it more perpendicular to the road, and somewhere in between, maybe do a sign that's parallel for others. So there are different ways that we can probably look at posting to at least give a bit of visibility.
And Mr. Chair and Commissioners and Mr. Price, I think sometimes our intentions are really good, but when we don't even set I don't want to say a deadline, but at least a goal in terms of when we're going to do something, it kind of gets lost in the mix. And one of the gentlemen talked about earlier that there is a certain time when the agenda items of county council are not quite as intense. So maybe if Mr. Price could come back to us with not it done, but the proposal in terms of costs, et cetera, by January 2023, is that reasonable?
So you would like us to bring the cost?
Like the cost of digital ads, the cost of making some of the changes that we mentioned earlier. Could we have that maybe by January of 2023? Is that a reasonable time frame?
Sure.
Okay.
I think we may meet February because unless you want to have a special call meeting in January, but typically Planning Commission doesn't meet in January.
February is fine with me, but I mean, I can't speak for the entire commission, but I think that would be good when we have a goal in mind and a date in mind.
Chair.
Yes, Mr. Dennis.
I got some information from Ms. Frierson. So actually this weekend I was on one of the websites getting ready to run an ad for my company. It was a blip between, because they do them in blips. So the blip between 7 and 10 are the most traffic times. And for me to run it for 7 days is going to be roughly about $800.
That's helpful. And I'll just add, I'm a member of the League of Women Voters, and we did a digital ad prior to the end of voter registration coming to an end, and I really have no idea the cost because it was another committee. But my point is, when you're in a certain area where the traffic is heavy and you have to be held up in the traffic, you have quite a bit of time to look at it. And some of the placements of those digital ads, it's just really optimal. So I think that it would be good for us to, as we said, come up with this time frame. And Mr. Price has proposed February of 2023, which seems reasonable because, I mean, we can get a great bang for our buck, in my opinion, if we look at that.
I would like to point out one of the things that we have to take in consideration as we go to a larger signs, potentially with the digital signs, that all properties that are subject for a rezoning request don't really allow for the room to place signage. And so there are some times when we're barely putting the signs in the right of way. And of course, I don't think DOT is going to want us to put a digital sign or anything of any potential size in their right of way. So we have to take those into consideration, that there may be times when it's just not really feasible to be able to put a sign on the property.
What I meant really wasn't purchasing a new digital billboard, like I don't know the name of the streets, but you know the one that's nearby. It's not too far from Transitions. The ones that are already existing and the one off of Two Notch, and I may miss a few others. Some of those are already placed, and I'm not saying to use them in place of the ones that you put in the neighborhood, but I mean in addition to.
Okay.
And it does look like staff found that we did have that the posted notice requirement. There's at least one notice for every 150 feet. And I believe we cut that in half from the original draft, which was one every 300 feet. So thank you for that. And Ms. Frierson, thank you for your input.
You're welcome.
Look forward to seeing what kind of information staff can put together on that when it comes to potential call.
Mr. Chair, comment?
Yes, Mr. Yonke.
I think it's a great discussion on signage versus physical signs and digital ones that we're talking about. Staff, are we doing any sort of social media campaigns? We're not going to reach all ages of the population all the same way. But for example, I sold my car via Facebook ads and they pop up as people scroll through. Are we doing any digital signs? It's going to show up based off your location as you're scrolling through and be pretty eye-catching and affordable. So are we doing any type of social media campaigns? I spent a couple of pennies to sell my car.
Are we referring to the land development code itself, or are we just looking at individual rezonings?
Rezonings. In addition to the signs that we physically put in the right of way.
No, I would say no, other than what we do on our web page and what we advertise in the paper. However, I believe we can work with our PIO department to find better ways to make sure that these requests and anything that's going before any of our boards and committees is, communicated more broadly to, is dedicated as sent out to more broadly sent out to the residents in an area. So I think that I agree that there's more technology out there for us to start using. We just have to kind of put the first foot forward to do it.
Ms. Price, can we add this to our discussion for February with Ms. Frierson and the digital billboards to also talk about more social media? Because I feel like we can do it. We can get this in front of people's eyes who are not even looking as they're scrolling through Twitter feeds and Facebook feeds in a very cost-effective way in the county. I've seen it based off zip code. You're in a certain zip code and you happen to see this sign that we post, just a picture of it. Maybe so we don't have to distract drivers as they're going down the street. Thank you.
Mr. Yonke.
Chairman, when you.
Yes, Mr. Johnson.
Last thing for me for today. I want to thank Mr. Jensen for his comments in terms of switching back from the ongoing applications signage back to the conversation on the public participation process as it relates to the rewrite on the land development code and commitment to, after we get approval, to have some public engagement before council takes action. But I think it's also a good opportunity, Mr. Price, Mr. Jensen, to weave into our conversation the email from Mr. Taylor about some of his constituents writing, because I think that, Mr. Jensen's chart addresses bullet number 1 and bullet, I think, number 4, which goes back to the progress that we've made as it relates to our density. But I think that bullet number 3, I just want to read that because I think it really ties back to my point about outreach in public. It's saying before approval, written notifications need to be mailed, marked in red to every landowner in those zones designated as HM, AG, and RT. That doesn't mean you should neglect the other zones, but also use the media and other avenues to notify the pending changes, letters coming. Only been one mail out that is related to the new zoning codes. But again, I think that prior to us making a recommendation, finalizing it out, that some other type of outreach, as staff has pointed out, the letters have certainly, or notices have generated a certain amount of response. But I just think just to take action that some type of outreach is done. And the email that I guess for the public that was sent out was just a constituents email in that came to one of the commissioners and was forwarded to the rest of the commission. But I just thought that correspondence tied back to the agenda item. I think it was just worth noting since he took the send it in.
Thank you. Yes, Mr. Price.
Yeah. Okay. So for clarification, and this is more for Mr. Johnson, what he's stating, are we looking to do more, I guess, publicizing, or at least try to get more citizen involvement prior to the planning commission making their recommendation to council?
That's what I was suggesting, please.
Okay.
All right. Anything else on this topic for now? Right. Very good. Let's see. We did want to just note, didn't call roll earlier. So just for the record, those that are present are Commissioners Branham, Dennis, Yonke, Johnson, Frierson, Metz, Durant, and Sirks. Commissioner Taylor wasn't able to make it today due to a work commitment and travel out of state. Again, our next scheduled meeting is for November 7th at 3 p.m. here in County Council chambers, and would encourage those of you that would like to put forth any motions that you might like to, based out of today's conversations or otherwise. And yeah, let me just take a moment of personal privilege to highlight one of our staff members, Mr. Tommy DeLage. I was speaking with a resident over the weekend, I think it was, and they just could not say enough good things about working with Mr. DeLage on a particular item. I won't get into any details at all, just because I want to keep the confidence of the person that I was speaking to, but they just noted his commitment to the issue and the concern, and kind of his tenacity in working with other departments of government and levels of government to help address a concern that they had related to zoning. So just wanted to pass along the kudos to Mr. DeLage. Good work on that. And then if there's nothing else, the chair will entertain a motion to adjourn.
Mr. Chair, again, before
yes, Mr. Price,
after adjournment, we'll make sure that you pick up your lunches before you leave.
Okay, thank you very much. All right. Is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Thank you. All right, moved and seconded for adjournment. Would you please take the vote, Mr. Price?
Those for adjournment: Branham.
Aye.
Dennis.
Aye.
Yonke.
Aye.
Johnson.
Aye.
Frierson. Metz.
Aye.
Durant.
Aye.
Sirks.
Clerk's
That motion
clerk's left
passes.
early. Thank you. Motion passes. We're adjourned.